The seas around Britain are known to be amongst the most dangerous and deadly in the world. Over the years, literally thousands of ships have met premature ends around the coasts and ports of this small island. Sheppey, home to over 8,500 people. Situated at the entrance to the Thames estuary, Sheppey has a bustling tourist trade and also has its feet firmly grounded in an industrial port. Every year, thousands of vessels make the journey past Sheppey along two of Europe's busiest shipping lanes, which bring industry to England. However, in the very middle of these two shipping lanes lies the remains of a ship with a dramatic story to tell. Just under 2 miles from the sea wall, and clearly visible from the shore, the masts of the semi-submerged wreck, the SS Richard Montgomery, act as a headstone and a warning to other vessels of the dangers of the shallow waters of Sheppey. What is interesting about the Montgomery is that she still has half her payload on board. June 6, 1944, D-Day. An Allied force of more than 150,000 troops, 5,000 ships, and 800 aircraft assault 50 miles of northern France's Normandy coastline. More than 4,000 Allied troops die and 6,000 are wounded. But a high price is rewarded as the Allies succeed in breaching Hitler's coastal defence of France. In order for the Allies to maintain their precarious foothold, they needed a constant supply of munitions. The Liberty ship USS Richard Montgomery was to deliver valuable ammunitions to forces in Cherbourg. Its journey began in Philadelphia, where it sailed to Britain before it was due to join a convoy of ships headed for Cherbourg, France. Liberty ships were built as part of a $350 million program introduced by Roosevelt during the Second World War. They took around 50 days to build, had a top speed of 12 knots and weighed 11,000 tons unloaded.
It was intended that the ship would come to the Thames estuary, where it would then be made into a convoy, which in turn would then sail under escort for Cherbourg.
Just 2 weeks after the Allied forces had assaulted Normandy, a backup of supplies was already arriving in the English Channel.
Having arrived in the Thames estuary, it was allocated a parking spot, for want of a better word, by HMS Lee, which was located at the end of Southend Pier, and the man in charge there was Lieutenant Commander Walmsley, and he instructed his second in command, a man called Foley, to position the ship in a particular spot. Foley, realising that a Liberty ship had a 28-foot draft, also knew that this particular ship had a 31-foot draft because of its loading. And he told Walmsley that it wasn't wise to position the ship there because it was very close to Sheerness Middle Sand, and if the wind direction changed, then the chances are this thing would be blown onto Middle Sands and run aground.
The following morning, as Foley had predicted, the wind changed. The USS Montgomery pulled its anchor and a large bang was heard which echoed across the estuary. The ship was stuck fast on the Middle Sands and had broken its back.
Foley was immediately posted away from HMS Lee to another destination, and so when they had a board of inquiry which was held on board the Montgomery, Foley was not present. The inquiry found that Captain Wilkes was to blame, and so all blame from Lieutenant Commander Walmsley passed to Wilkes, and he never was reprimanded for anything that he did.
The Admiralty now had the problem of a semi-submerged wreck loaded with 7,000 tons of explosive cargo. With German submarines active around the area, the order was given to start clearing as much of the Montgomery's cargo as possible.
They offloaded storage areas 1 and 2, which meant that the hull of the ship then took a funny angle, and it then got too dangerous to move it, the cargo that is, and so they decided to leave it.
What remained on board when operations to salvage the Montgomery were finally abandoned on September the 25th, 1944, amounted to some 3,000 tons of unexploded munitions, including armour-piercing bombs and small munitions. More concerning was the actual contents of the bombs, white phosphorus, which could spontaneously explode if exposed to oxygen. As part of the surveillance of the Montgomery each year since it ran aground, a survey is carried out by the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. This survey involves a team of divers and members of the bomb squad carrying out surveys on the condition of the ship's hull and, more importantly, the condition of the cargo. The boat is under 24-hour radar surveillance from the Coast Guard, and perimeter buoys ensure that all craft keep a safe distance from the semi-submerged wreck. If it should explode, the effects would be catastrophic and would spread for miles along the coast. Despite the measures that have been put in place to avoid any collisions with the Montgomery, the boat has been the subject of some very near misses, including a near-catastrophic incident in 2001 when the Mare Ultim followed another boat into the estuary but became confused by the perimeter buoys and headed straight for the wreck. Disaster was only averted when the captain realised something was wrong and turned off the ship's autopilot. The ship has been lying peacefully for over 60 years, but can we expect the Montgomery to sleep quietly forever?
There's no risks in the short term, but there are risks within the next 10 years, so not in the immediate future, but we have to resolve it by about 2015. Well, the risk is that it'll go up. It's in three parts. The forward part has the ammunition, and it will be difficult to really know, the danger. Some of the reports suggest it will create a wave of that will last about 8 miles. So it would go to Canvey Island, it would go a little bit up to Chatham, it would go down to possibly to Ramsgate, certainly to Faversham, and would cause, blowing out of windows, no doubt, and some problems.
The Southend Corporation did an assessment a few years ago, and they estimated that there would be a huge tidal wave which would not only go to Southend but also the other way to Sheerness. It's estimated that the range of damage would be 2 miles, and with air blast up to 8 miles.
Such an explosion would take in a local oil refinery as well as take out power, water and communications. Any boat in the vicinity at the time would also be at extreme risk. The anticipated size of the wave caused by an explosion would be 1 metre high towards the shores of Sheppey, easily exceeding Sheppey's sea defences. A separate 3-metre wave is also predicted to be sent down the estuary itself, causing excessive damage and public injury. The report does, however, state that the biggest threat to members of the public is from shattered glass flying as a result of the force of the explosion. The government has looked into possible resolutions for the future of the Montgomery. But what are the options?
Well, there are really 5 recommendations, but in practice probably 2 or 3. I guess if you were really daft, you'd blow it up, but there'd be such an insurance scam. Such an insurance claim on that, you wouldn't do that. Doing nothing's not an option, so because it's unsteady. So the 3 really are to tow it away. If you can do that, that requires huge amounts of money and some clever technology. To put a bund over it, which I think is probably the best solution. Whether you put I don't know what type of bund you put over it. I guess if it goes off, the bund's got to be pretty strong. And then you've got to build that over the wreck anyway, so you take the risk then of whatever that risk is. There's a risk in everything.
And the other one, of course, is to bring each round of ammunition up one at a time, and again the cost would be so prohibitive. The problem is that no government department will take on the responsibility of the finance involved.
It's the government's role. It was done in British waters, and so the British are responsible for it.
According to reports, complete removal of the wreck would cost over £27 million. Building a bund over the wreck would only cost £6 million. The matter of the Montgomery's future is also subject of debate to the people of Sheppey, where the boat has become something of a landmark.
Well, in a way it is, yes. It's sort of, it's like part of the family, really.
I think you're better off just leaving it as it is.
As far as the Sheerness people are concerned, it's a good tourist earner.
It has been a landmark. It's not sensible for a government to leave it to blow up on its own.
While the debate lingers on, searching for a resolution, the Montgomery still stands as a reminder of victorious times. Unlike the Allies of that day in 1944, its fate is no longer in its own hands. The shipping lanes. The boat, we're going to do an and, is there, in there? And the boat is under... No. We're not, fine. Okay, sorry. Today, measures are in place to ensure the safety of the people using the shipping lanes. The boat is under 24-hour radar surveillance from the Coast Guard and perimeter... The boat is under 24-hour radar surveillance from the Coast Guard and perimeter buoys in... got it, okay. The boat is under 24-hour radar surveillance from the Coast Guard, and perimeter buoys ensure that all craft keep a safe distance from the semi-submerged wreck. If it should explode, the effects would be catastrophic and would spread for miles along the coast. I'm going to give you another one of those. If it should explode, the effects would be catastrophic and would spread for miles along the coast. Despite the